Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt journeys of love, resilience, and life-changing lessons. Today's story is about Ryan, a young boy who faced unimaginable challenges after his father abandoned their family. Forced to grow up too soon, Ryan took on the role of provider and protector for his disabled mother and baby sister. But when an unexpected lottery win changes their lives, Ryan is faced with a choice: to forgive the father who left them or to hold on to the anger that defined his childhood. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories as we begin today's powerful story. In a small, quiet town in the American Midwest, there lived a family who, for a time, believed they had everything they needed to be happy. Emily was a strong and independent woman, the kind of person who could light up a room with her warmth. She had married Jack, a charming man with a knack for making her laugh. Together, they built a life filled with dreams and the hope of raising a family. When their son Ryan was born, it seemed like the culmination of all they had hoped for. But life, as it often does, had its own plans. Years later, when Emily was pregnant with their second child, complications arose. The birth of their daughter was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but it came at a great cost. Emily experienced a traumatic delivery that left her physically disabled. Unable to walk and dependent on a wheelchair, Emily's life changed in an instant. The strong, independent woman who had once stood tall now found herself unable to even stand at all. At first, Jack stayed by her side. He tried to reassure her that everything would be fine, that they would adjust to this new reality together. But as the days turned into weeks, the strain began to show. Jack started to withdraw, spending less time at home and more time making excuses to leave. One morning, Emily woke up to find a note on the kitchen table. Jack was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Just an empty space where her partner had once been. For Ryan, who was only 10 years old at the time, the abandonment was incomprehensible. His father had always been his hero, the man he looked up to for guidance and protection. Now, that man had vanished without a trace, leaving Ryan to grapple with feelings he couldn't yet articulate: confusion, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Emily tried her best to keep the family afloat, but her disability made it nearly impossible to work. With no extended family to lean on, she had to rely on her son far more than she wanted to. She hated the idea of burdening Ryan, but there was no other choice. Each morning, she would wheel herself to the window and watch as Ryan, carrying a bag far too big for his small frame, headed out into the world to do whatever odd jobs he could find. He fetched water from the town pump, helped neighbors with chores, and even scavenged for scrap metal to sell. Every coin he earned went toward food and essentials for his mother and baby sister. Ryan's classmates, oblivious to the weight he carried, teased him for his ragged clothes and tired eyes. While they played and laughed during recess, Ryan often sat alone, his thoughts consumed by how he would make it through another day. At night, he would sit beside his mother's wheelchair, holding her hand as she whispered words of gratitude and encouragement. "We'll get through this, Ryan," she would say, though her voice often cracked under the strain of her own doubts. Emily's heart broke a little more each day as she watched her son take on responsibilities far beyond his years. She had always dreamed of giving him a childhood filled with joy and freedom. But now, that dream seemed as distant as the man who had left them. Still, she admired Ryan's resilience. Despite the harsh realities of their life, he never complained. He woke up each morning with a determination that belied his age, driven by a fierce love for his family. There were moments, however, when the weight became too much for Ryan to bear. Alone in the quiet of the night, he would cry into his pillow, mourning the childhood he had lost and the father he had once adored. He couldn't understand why Jack had left. Had they done something wrong? Wasn't their family worth fighting for? These questions haunted him, and no matter how hard he tried to push them away, they always came back. As the months turned into years, The rhythm of their lives became one of survival. Emily's health remained fragile. And though she tried to contribute in small ways, sewing or baking when her energy allowed, it was Ryan who bore the brunt of their struggles. Yet, even in the face of adversity, their bond as a family remained unbreakable. Emily often told Ryan how proud she was of him, how his strength gave her hope. And Ryan, in turn, found solace in his mother's unwavering love. But beneath the surface of their resilience lay a shared pain that neither of them could fully express: the absence of Jack. His departure had left a void that no amount of hard work or determination could fill. For Emily, it was the loss of a partner, someone she had trusted to stand by her through life's challenges. For Ryan, it was the loss of a father, a figure who should have been there to guide him but instead had chosen to walk away. Little did they know, their lives were about to take an unexpected turn. A twist of fate would soon bring both blessings and challenges, forcing them to confront the ghosts of their past and the question of whether forgiveness was even possible. For now, though, they faced each day as they always had, with courage, love, and the unyielding hope that better days lay ahead. As Ryan grew older, his responsibilities only deepened. At 12 years old, he had already lived a life far more demanding than most adults. Each day started early with a list of tasks he had assigned himself, driven by the need to keep his family afloat. The small, run-down house they lived in often echoed with the cries of his baby sister, a constant reminder of how fragile their situation was. The mornings were the hardest. Ryan would wake before sunrise, quietly slipping out of bed so as not to disturb his mother, Emily, or his sister. He'd gather his tools, an old bucket, a pair of gloves worn thin, and a tattered bag, and set out to collect anything that could be sold. His path took him through alleys and trash heaps, where he scavenged for scrap metal, discarded bottles, or any item that held even a glimmer of value. It was dirty, exhausting work, but Ryan never complained. He knew that every piece of metal, every bottle, brought them a little closer to another meal or another day of safety. At school, Ryan was a shadow of his peers. While other children laughed and played, he sat quietly at his desk, his mind often wandering to the chores awaiting him after class. He carried a shame he couldn't articulate, feeling the weight of their judgment as they teased him about his ragged clothes and the faint smell of rust that clung to him. "Metal boy," they'd jeer. But Ryan held his head high, refusing to let their words break him. Emily, confined to her wheelchair, watched helplessly as her son shouldered burdens that no child should bear. She tried to contribute in small ways, mending his clothes, teaching him how to budget their meager earnings, but she knew it wasn't enough. Her heart ached as she saw Ryan's hands calloused from labor and his eyes, which should have sparkled with the wonder of youth, instead shadowed by exhaustion. "Ryan," she said one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table, "you're doing so much for us. I just wish I could do more." Ryan shook his head and reached across the table to take her hand. "You've done enough, Mom," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I just want to make sure you and Ellie are okay." Emily smiled at him through her tears. Her son's strength and resilience astounded her. But it also broke her heart. No mother wanted this for her child. Yet, there he was, rising to every challenge life threw at him with a determination that left her both proud and deeply sorrowful. Ryan's life wasn't entirely devoid of kindness. Occasionally, neighbors would hire him for small errands or offer him a hot meal in exchange for chores. One elderly woman, Mrs. Walker, often asked Ryan to help in her garden, paying him with a warm plate of food and a few dollars. "You're a good boy, Ryan," she would say, ruffling his hair. "Your mama raised you right." It was these small acts of kindness that reminded Ryan that not everyone in the world was as heartless as his father had been. But even these moments of light couldn't erase the darkness Jack's absence had left behind. Ryan often wondered about his father. Where had he gone? Why had he left them? The questions haunted him, especially on nights when the house was quiet, and his mother's soft breathing was the only sound. He tried to hate Jack, to convince himself that the man wasn't worth his thoughts. But the anger always gave way to something deeper, a longing for the father he had once adored. By the time Ryan turned 14, he had become a figure of quiet resilience in their small town. People noticed his hard work and his unwavering devotion to his family. And though many admired him, few truly understood the weight he carried. For Ryan, survival was a daily battle, and he had no time to reflect on his own needs or desires. Emily, too, noticed how much Ryan had matured. Though she wished he could have had a normal childhood, she couldn't help but marvel at the man he was becoming. "Your father doesn't know what is missing," she said one day, her voice tinged with both pride and sadness. "He left behind the best thing in his life." Ryan didn't respond, but her words stayed with him. He had spent so much of his life trying to fill the void Jack had left. But deep down, he knew that nothing could truly replace a father's love. Yet, even as he grappled with these emotions, he remained steadfast in his mission to care for his family. Life continued in its relentless rhythm. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with Ryan working tirelessly to keep them afloat. He had learned to navigate the hardships of poverty with a quiet strength. But the wounds left by his father's abandonment lingered. Little did Ryan know, the winds of change were about to sweep through their lives, bringing with them an unexpected twist that would challenge everything he believed about love, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. The morning began like any other for Ryan. The sun had barely risen, painting the small town in hues of gold and pink. Ryan laced up his worn sneakers, grabbed his battered bag, and headed out the door, leaving his mother, Emily, and his baby sister, Ellie, still asleep. He was used to this routine, scavenging for scraps, running errands, doing whatever he could to bring in a few dollars. But this day would be unlike any other. As Ryan combed through an alleyway filled with discarded junk, his sharp eyes caught sight of a small, crumpled piece of paper wedged between two empty cans. Curious, he picked it up and unfolded it. It was an old lottery ticket. Faded and slightly torn, he stared at it for a moment, debating whether to throw it back into the pile or keep it. Something about it made him pause. It felt like a relic of someone else's dashed hopes. Yet a small voice inside him whispered, "What if?" Ryan slipped the ticket into his pocket and continued his work, trying not to think too much about it. By the time he returned home that evening, tired and covered in grime, the ticket had all but slipped from his mind. It wasn't until he emptied his pockets to count the few coins he'd earned that he saw it again. He held it up to the light, examining the numbers printed across it. "Mom," he said, holding the ticket out toward Emily, who was seated in her wheelchair, "do you think this could still be valid?" Emily squinted at the ticket and shrugged. "I don't know, sweetheart. But it doesn't hurt to check." The following day, Ryan made his way to the nearest lottery office. The building was small and unassuming, its faded sign barely visible against the backdrop of the bustling street. As he stepped inside, the air felt thick with anticipation. He approached the counter and handed the ticket to the clerk, his heart pounding in his chest. The clerk scanned the ticket, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a message flashed across the screen, and the clerk's eyes widened. "Congratulations," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You've won $2 million. Ryan stared at the clerk, unable to process the words. "What?" he managed to whisper, his voice trembling. The clerk nodded, smiling now. "You've won. It's real." The world seemed to tilt around Ryan as he clutched the ticket in his hand. The weight of years of struggle, of endless days spent scavenging and worrying, seemed to lift all at once. He stumbled out of the office, his mind racing. $2 million. The number felt unreal, like something out of a dream. He walked home in a daze, clutching the ticket as though it might vanish if he let go. When he burst through the door, Emily looked up in alarm. "Ryan, what's wrong?" Ryan held up the ticket. his face flushed with excitement. "We won. Mom. We won $2 million. Emily's eyes widened. And for a moment, she was speechless. Then, tears began to stream down her face. "Are you serious?" she whispered. Ryan nodded, unable to suppress his grin. "We can finally fix everything. Mom, you can get the treatment you need. Ellie can have a real future. We don't have to live like this anymore." Over the next few weeks, their lives transformed. Emily underwent medical treatments that had once seemed like an impossible luxury. Slowly, she began to regain her strength, able to stand and even take a few steps with the help of a walker. For Ryan, seeing his mother smile again, truly smile, was worth more than the money itself. They moved into a new home, one with enough space for all of them to live comfortably. Ryan enrolled in a better school, where he no longer had to hide his worn shoes or endure the taunts of his classmates. For the first time in years, they had enough food, enough clothes, enough hope. But as the dust settled and their new life began to take shape, an unexpected shadow loomed on the horizon. Ryan had thought that their struggle was over, that they could finally leave the pain of the past behind. What he didn't know was that his father, Jack, had seen the news of their lottery win. And now, the man who had abandoned them was about to re-enter their lives, bringing with him questions that Ryan wasn't sure he was ready to face. The days after their lottery win were filled with moments of joy and relief. Emily's health improved steadily, and the lightness in her laughter made their new home feel like a sanctuary. Ryan began to experience a semblance of normalcy, a life where he didn't have to wake up worrying about how to make ends meet. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream of a future beyond survival. But peace is often fleeting, and their newfound happiness was about to be tested. One afternoon, as Ryan sat at the dining table finishing his homework, he noticed Emily staring at the newspaper. Her brow furrowed as her eyes scanned the page. "What's wrong, Mom?" Ryan asked, setting his pencil down. Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the paper. Finally, she pushed it toward him. "Look at this," she said softly. Ryan's heart sank as he read the headline, "Local family wins $2 million lottery after years of hardship." Beneath it was a photo of him and Emily outside the lottery office, smiling for the cameras. At first, Ryan felt a sense of pride. But then he noticed the article's mention of Jack. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Estranged father Jack Turner, who reportedly abandoned his family years ago, has expressed interest in reconnecting with them following their recent windfall. Ryan's stomach churned. He could barely believe what he was reading. Jack, the man who had walked out on them when they needed him most, now wanted to come back. The very thought made his blood boil. "Why now?" Ryan muttered, more to himself than to Emily. "Why does he suddenly care?" Emily looked at her son, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "People like your father, they don't change, Ryan. He made his choice a long time ago." Ryan nodded, but anger bubbled beneath the surface. He wanted to slam the door on Jack before he even reached it, to tell him that he wasn't welcome in their lives. But a part of him, a small, conflicted part, wondered what Jack would say if given the chance. The next day, the phone rang. Ryan hesitated before answering, his hand hovering over the receiver. When he finally picked it up, the voice on the other end froze him in place. "Ryan," the voice said, tentative and soft. "It's me. It's Dad." Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He wanted to yell, to demand answers. But all that came out was, "What do you want?" There was a long pause before Jack replied. I saw the news. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but I want to make things right. I want to see you and your mom. Please. Just give me a chance." Ryan's chest tightened. He could hear the emotion in Jack's voice. But it wasn't enough to erase the years of pain. "You don't get to do this," Ryan said, his voice trembling. "You don't get to leave us and then come back when it's convenient for you." Ryan. I know I've failed you, Jack said, his voice cracking. But I'm trying to change. I just want to explain. You don't deserve to explain, Ryan snapped, cutting him off. We've done fine without you. Don't think you can just waltz back into our lives because we have money now. Before Jack could respond, Ryan hung up. His hands shook as he set the phone down, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He turned to find Emily watching him from the doorway. Was it him? She asked. Ryan nodded. He wants to come back. Emily's face hardened. He doesn't deserve to. But Ryan couldn't shake the conversation. Jack's voice, filled with regret, lingered in his mind. The boy inside him, the one who had once idolized his father, wanted to believe that Jack's words were genuine. But the man he was becoming knew better. Forgiveness wasn't something Jack could demand, it had to be earned. As the days passed, Ryan wrestled with his emotions. He replayed the call in his head, wondering if he should have given Jack a chance to speak. But every time he thought about the years of hardship, the nights he spent scavenging to keep them alive, his anger flared again. Then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. Ryan opened it cautiously, his heart pounding. Standing there was Jack, looking older and thinner than Ryan remembered. His face was etched with lines of regret. His shoulders slumped as though carrying the weight of his choices. Ryan, Jack said softly, please, just hear me out. Ryan stared at him, the anger and confusion swirling in his chest. Part of him wanted to slam the door, but another part, the part that still yearned for answers, hesitated. He stepped aside, letting Jack in, knowing that this conversation would change everything. As Jack stepped into the living room, Ryan couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. Emily, seated in her wheelchair, looked up sharply. Her expression hardened the moment her eyes met Jack's. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Jack stood awkwardly, his hands fidgeting as if unsure what to do with them. He looked at Emily first. Emily, he began, his voice hesitant. I know I don't deserve to be here, but I needed to see you both. Emily's jaw tightened. You have some nerve showing up here, Jack, she said, her tone cold but controlled. After everything you put us through. Jack nodded, accepting her words without protest. I know I failed you. I failed all of you, he said. And I'm not here to make excuses. I just want to apologize. Ryan couldn't hold back any longer. Apologize, he said, his voice rising. Do you think that's enough? Do you have any idea what we've been through because of you? Jack turned to Ryan, his face etched with sorrow. I can't undo what I did. Ryan, I can only tell you how sorry I am. I was a coward. I ran because I didn't know how to handle things. But not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted it. Ryan clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. You left us, Dad. You didn't even say goodbye. You just walked away and left me to take care of everything. I was 10 years old. Do you have any idea how hard it's been? Jack's eyes glistened with tears. I know, he said quietly. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want to try to make things right. Emily, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Make things right? How exactly do you plan to do that? Jack, you abandoned us when we needed you most. There's no fixing that. Jack's shoulders slumped, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how. Emily, I just know that I need to try. I need to earn back your trust. If you'll let me. Ryan's anger gave way to something more complex, a mix of sadness, confusion, and the faintest flicker of hope. Why now? He asked. Why did it take you this long? Jack hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. Because I was ashamed, he admitted. I was ashamed of what I'd done. And I didn't know how to face you. But when I saw the news about the lottery, it reminded me of what I lost. And I realized I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to come back. Ryan scoffed. So it took us winning money for you to care. That's what it took to remind you we exist. Jack shook his head emphatically. No, Ryan. It wasn't the money. It was seeing you. Seeing your mom. It brought everything back. And I knew I had to face what I'd done. Emily sighed heavily, her exhaustion evident. Jack. You're right about one thing. You don't deserve forgiveness. But I can't stop Ryan from making his own choice. If he wants to hear you out, that's up to him. Ryan glanced at his mother, her words cutting through his confusion. He turned back to Jack, his emotions swirling. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said, his voice trembling. But I'll give you a chance to explain. That's all you're getting. Jack nodded, tears streaming down his face. That's all I'm asking for, he said. The conversation continued late into the evening, with Jack recounting the pain and guilt he had carried since leaving. He spoke of his mistakes, his fears, and his desire to make amends. For Ryan, it was a painful but necessary confrontation, one that began to open the door to understanding. As Jack left that night, Ryan felt a strange mix of emotions. The anger was still there, but so was a glimmer of something new, a possibility of healing. If not forgiveness. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time, Ryan began to wonder if letting go of the past might be the only way to truly move forward. After Jack left that night, the house was silent. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, his thoughts tangled in a web of anger, confusion, and a faint hope he didn't want to acknowledge. Emily, seated across from him, watched her son carefully. She knew the battle raging within him because she felt it too. You don't have to decide anything right now, she said softly. Take your time. Ryan. This isn't something you can rush. Ryan nodded but didn't speak. He knew his mother was right. But that didn't make it any easier. The man who had abandoned them, who had left him to grow up too quickly, now wanted back into their lives. Could he ever forgive Jack for what he had done? More importantly, did he even want to? In the days that followed, Ryan found himself replaying their conversation over and over. Jack's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the memories of the years he had spent struggling to fill the void his father had left. Each time he thought about forgiving Jack, his anger resurfaced, sharp and unrelenting. Yet, something else lingered too. Beneath the anger was a small, persistent voice, a part of him that still longed for the father he had once adored. It whispered questions he couldn't ignore. Could Jack really change? Was it possible for them to rebuild something, even if it wasn't the same as before? One evening, as Ryan stared out the window at the darkening sky, Emily wheeled herself into the room. You've been quiet, she said, breaking the silence. Ryan turned to her, his expression heavy with thought. I don't know what to do, Mom, he admitted. Part of me wants to slam the door on him forever. But, part of me doesn't. Emily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. I've been asking myself the same thing. But here's what I know. Ryan. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the anger that holds you back. Whether or not you let him back into your life is up to you. But don't let what he did keep you from moving forward. Her words settled over Ryan like a soft blanket, offering a sense of clarity he hadn't felt before. He realized that forgiving Jack didn't have to mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. It could simply mean releasing the weight of the past so it no longer controlled him. The next day, Ryan made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed Jack's number. When his father answered, Ryan's voice was steady but guarded. I've been thinking, he said. I'm not ready to forgive you. And I don't know if I ever will. But I'm willing to meet you again. Just, to talk. Jack's voice cracked with emotion. Thank you, Ryan. That means more than you know. When they met a week later, the tension was palpable. Jack looked nervous, his hands fidgeting as he sat across from Ryan at the small diner they had chosen. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. I'm not here to make this easy for you, Ryan said finally. Breaking the quiet. I just need to understand why you left. Jack took a deep breath. His gaze fixed on the table. I was scared, he admitted. When your mom got sick, I didn't know how to handle it. I felt like I was drowning. Like I wasn't enough to hold everything together. So, I ran. It was the worst decision of my life. And I've regretted it every day since. Ryan listened. His anger softening into something more complex. He could hear the pain in his father's voice. But it didn't erase the years of hardship he and Emily had endured. You left us with nothing, Ryan said. His voice tight. Do you even know what that did to me? To Mom? Jack nodded. Tears glistening in his eyes. I do now, Ryan. And I'm so sorry. I know I can't fix what I've done. But I want to try. Even if it's just a little. Ryan didn't respond immediately. He let the words settle. Weighing their sincerity. For the first time, he saw Jack not as the man who had abandoned them, but as someone who was deeply flawed. Broken even. It didn't excuse his actions. But it made him human. When they left the diner that day, Ryan didn't feel a sudden sense of closure or relief. But he felt lighter. As though a small piece of the weight he had been carrying had shifted. He wasn't ready to forgive Jack completely, but he had taken the first step toward healing. And for now, that was enough. Back at home, Emily noticed the change in Ryan. You look different, she said as they sat together that evening. I feel different, Ryan admitted. I'm not ready to forgive him. But I think I can stop hating him. Emily smiled softly, her eyes glistening with pride. That's a good start. In the weeks that followed, Ryan continued to process his feelings. Learning that forgiveness wasn't a single act but a journey. He focused on the present, on Emily's recovery, Ellie's laughter, and the life they were building together. And as the days turned into months, the anger that had once consumed him began to fade, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. In the end, Ryan learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's actions but about freeing yourself from the weight of the past. Though his father's betrayal had shaped much of his childhood, Ryan found the strength to let go of the anger that had held him captive. His family, once broken, began to rebuild itself not through wealth, but through love, resilience, and the courage to move forward. Jack continued to work toward earning his son's trust, knowing that forgiveness was a journey, not a guarantee. Meanwhile, Ryan and Emily embraced the life they had fought so hard to create, cherishing the moments of peace and happiness they had finally found. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey of love, resilience, and healing. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales like this one. See you in our next video.